Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer SS&C Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, or best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to see how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, and welcome to Transform Now. This is Xina Seaton, Vice President of Customer Experience at SS&C Blue Prism and a co-founder of Women Powering Digital Transformation. I'd like to welcome to the show today, Abhi Kadian. Hi, Abhi.
Hi, Xina. Excited to be on your podcast.
Really excited to have you. Why don't we start with an introduction?
Yeah, no worries. I said I'm Abhi Kadian. I have been in the automation game for a fair while now. I think it's up to 8 years, and I've been doing it in Australia before even the automation vendors had offices in Australia. So I've been working at some of the leading banks, and really proud to say that we've been scaling across the board. So I've had a lot of good experience and a lot of good success.
Great to hear. Well, I'm happy that you're here today to share some of those successes with our listeners. And as an automation expert, I'm curious, what are some of the key digital strategies that you've used to successfully deploy automation?
Yeah, look, I think it's, and you'll probably hear me talk about this a fair bit. It's all about what is a successful automation practice or capability. It's certainly one that scales, and I think that's something that doesn't happen as much as we would like to. I would say is kind of my read. So I think some of the keys to success is really being clear about what is the actual strategy. What are you going after? Are you going after cost? Is it capacity? Is it scale? Is it reducing risk? Is it customer experience? Is it a combination of it? And how are you going to go about achieving it? Yeah, I think that's really important to define your automation strategy and have that defined, agreed, endorsed at the highest levels of the organization is really important. I think then the second one is it's critical that you have a center of excellence, a hub where all the thinking and the planning and the methodologies and the way you go about delivering an automation, the governance, the practices, all that sort of stuff lives and continues to grow. As part of that, figuring out what the operating model is it a centralized COE, meaning it delivers all the automation centrally, or is it federated, or is it partially federated, which is kind of the inverse? Does the COE sit in the business or does it sit in IT? These are all really, really critical decisions that have to be made up front. And there's no one right model. There's no one right fit to those kind of pointed questions I've just noted. They all kind of depend on the organization's culture, the organization's model, the operating model within the organization, and when you come into an organization, it's important you take that read. You kind of take stock of where the organization is at, what is the culture, what's the model, and therefore land some of these critical things about the COE in the context of that. I think then the third thing I'd say is, investing in the best tools and investing in the best talent. It's really important. Like it's really important to also have grassroots talent and building up capability internally, which is great. But it's important you have people who've got the battle scars, who've been there, done that, had the battle scars, had the failures, and then had the learnings that they can bring in and help accelerate your transformation and accelerate what you're trying to do. And then, of course, having the right tools and having the tools, the right breadth, and delivering the right impact is important. So that's how I'd kind of look at invest. Then I think there's something around the way in which things are developed and then supported in terms of the automation. I think it's really important to have a very clear automation methodology. How do you go from nothing to something in production? What are all the gates? What are all the checklists? What are the entry and exit criteria? How do you have someone come in and develop? Is there an exam you put in? What is the quality and control you put in on the code? What is the quality control you put in on the design? I think that's really important. And some version of that in support as well is critical. And then I think finally, kind of underpinning all of this, I'd say, is having that support from the top. I think that's really important, that you've got top-down support, giving you the air cover, giving you the mandate and the license, and helping build the demand. Yeah, I'd say define the automation strategy, set up the center of excellence, invest in technical talent and tools, embed your delivery and support methodologies, and then top-down support.
Those are some great pointers, and I love a top 5. I'm curious, what's the most difficult part of those 5 pieces of the puzzle there?
Yeah, look, I think it all comes down to, scaling, and it's that getting that success, getting the runs on the board. And what I've seen is, practices become too expensive. At the end of the day, we're talking about automation. This is not the be all. It's the journey. On one end of the spectrum, you've got things getting done manually, and on the other end of the spectrum, you've got your more API straight through native digital. And then there's a big chasm in between. And the reality is there's a large amount of human debt, especially in companies that have existed and persisted for a long time. So that's where automation comes in. But what you don't want to have a situation is where your automation is really expensive, almost to the tune of expensive as, say, some of the digital or straight through work. So I think that's a challenge, and I think it's an important one to get right. Having all your tools in your automation toolkit being things that are relatively cheaper, fast, nimble, and can be delivered quickly and rapidly. I think that's one. I think the other thing I'd say is, and actually I realize I'm going down the top 5 again. So there you go. You'll be excited, Xina. But I think the second one is, at the end of the day, to get scale and to build this successfully, you really have to, it's getting the factory right. And I've seen a lot of places where the factory is not right. What do I mean by factory? Everything's got to be standardized. How can you build the Toyota factory of automation, if you will? So how do you have all of the process of going from an idea to something in production documented, articulated to such an extent that anyone can come in, anyone trained can come in and start following that process, so that the people are building stuff in the right way? How do you have the right standards so that the code is being built in the right way so that it can be reused? How do you have the right governance, checks and balances? So I think that's the other thing that I think is a challenge. And along those lines, really the governance. There's no faster way to stop an automation program than having a customer remediation or a privacy breach, because a robot's done something per the design, per the instruction so well that the design and instruction were incorrect, and it led to a bad customer outcome or a bad business outcome. That's kind of career limiting, if you will, from a automation perspective and a practice perspective. So having the right governance in place. Some of the things I've done, for example, is anyone who builds automation within my teams, we set exams, multi-hour exams. A lot of people fail them, and that's by design. Ultimately, it all comes down to the hands on the keyboard, number one, and number two, the quality of the design. So having the right checks and balances, the right governance in place, especially around quality, is critical. And then I think what tends to also happen, similar to the first point around making sure that what you're delivering is cheap, is what I've seen is, as we go with automation, you have different tools, and then you kind of build separate delivery teams for each tool. So it's like, okay, for tool A, I've got this team, and tool B, I've got this team, and tool C, I've got this team. All of a sudden, if you needed to deliver a solution that has a bit of tool A, B, and C, you got a very expensive project. And again, it's not going to hit the mark when it comes to the ethos of automation. So I think it's really important. Cross-training, cross-skilling is really critical. Having a fungible developer pool, I think, is really important. And then similarly and finally, I think in support, especially when you have multiple tools that make up an overall automation solution, typically support is looked at vertically per system. So system A, system B, system C, vertically is kind of the way support is. The problem you have is process automation is horizontal. Therefore, your support needs to be horizontal. So thinking a kind of bit of a paradigm shift in the way we think about support from a process automation perspective, thinking about it horizontally, thinking about having a single pane of glass that allows us to see where a digital solution automation, where a widget is at in the context of those tools through that life cycle. Yeah, there you go. They're the five. So going back again, it's the maintaining the ethos of robotics. So cheap and fast and nimble. I think that's a challenge. The other one is around standardization. Then the third one's around quality. The fourth one's around how development teams are organized. And then finally, how run and support is organized. Kind of my top 5 challenges I've seen.
I think that's very interesting, the paradigm shift from being vertical to horizontal. I had never really thought about that challenge, but now that you characterize it that way, I can see where vertical support is challenging even for me inside of my business. So one of the things you've mentioned a couple of times now, and I think this paradigm shift to horizontal versus vertical is a good way to think about people and skill sets of people. So how do you see managers and leaders such as yourself, and you've mentioned a few times some tests and things that you can put in place as barriers or as guardrails to ensure that you've got the right skill set. But how can managers and leaders develop these skills in the talent that they have?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the reality is there's nowhere near the amount of supply of automation skilled resources as there is the demand. And that would no doubt apply to many software technologies. So therein lies the criticality of having a balance of homegrown in-house talent that you build up, as well as some external expertise that you bring in. But I think fundamentally, what we're talking about these days, I mean, this era that we're in it's all low code, which means you don't need to be a full stack developer, Java developer to build in these things. I think it's important to have a mix, but you don't need to necessarily be a developer, but you do need to have a developer mindset. And that's important because it's important to be clear that it's not for everybody. Not everybody can develop automations or citizen development or those types of things, but there is a subset of people who are ripe for it. And those are those people who have developer mindset. And when I say developer mindset, I mean like you build a solution with one decision tree instead of 3 that has the same outcome. Obviously, the solution with one decision tree is more efficient and a better solution with less opportunities for failure than with 3. I'm just being overly simplistic, but trying to paint a picture on what I mean when I say a developer mindset. Yeah, so I think there is a lot of opportunity because the platforms are low code now. And it comes down to having seeded your capability or your team with the right skilled, experienced people who can then start to train and roll out a training. I think the other awesome thing is anyone who's doing VBAs or macros or SharePoint or SQL, they're ripe for the picking for automation. And there's a lot of people with those skills, people who've had to build those skills in, say, operations functions in all companies because they've had to figure out how to do this manual stuff a little bit better using the Microsoft suite. And so therein lies a great opportunity to train people and leverage existing skills in them. The other great area is, of course, graduates. really think like, and I would say specifically technology graduates, really great synergies. They're hungry as with all young graduates these days. They want to, and if I reflect on my past experience, I don't believe I was any different as a grad a while ago, but you want to come in and you want to deliver some impact. You don't necessarily want to be on a project that's going to deliver an impact in 2 to 3 years' time. You want something a bit sooner. So and again, back to this whole low code platform thing, you can train people up in a few months. Again, if they've got the right mindset, as I mentioned before, and you can, within 6 months, they can be delivering or participating in a project that delivers an outcome. And I think that's a great synergy. So I think tech graduates, great kind of space for automation is a great space for these types of people who can very quickly get some skills, get some accreditation, and kind of then grow from there.
Do you have many citizen developers within your organization? Going back earlier, you mentioned getting the right kind of structure around your operating model. You mentioned federated, somewhere in the middle, or completely centralized. Would a citizen developer be part of that federated model that you mentioned?
Yeah, I would say so. Some organizations will have a federated model, and within certain guardrails, there could be an opportunity to have citizen development be performed. But again, it comes down to the tools and the applicability of certain tools to citizen development, as well as the way in which you govern it. There's no point having citizen development in place where a citizen can't really develop something without so much scrutiny that it just adds so much overhead and they're not going to bother. So it's about finding the right balance from a governance perspective where there's guardrails, and as long as they're operating within the guardrails, they can do what they need to do. Again, though, the model depends on the organization and the citizen development specifically, again, depends on the type of tools. Not every tool is appropriate for citizen development. And then there is a difference between citizen development and low code. Low code being materially more complex than, say, citizen development. And low code is where you need formal training, where you need to have a developer mindset, and you need to build things in a way where you don't have, as I mentioned before, those privacy breaches and customer remediations. Whereas in citizen development, you'd be kind of containerized in such a manner that you can't have those negative outcomes. And there are such guardrails where it allows someone to build stuff and kind of scratch that itch, but it won't hit that level of criticality.
That's an excellent description and way to think about citizen development. I appreciate that clarity from you. And leveraging all of your experience, where do you think automation is headed? If you were to predict what's next, what would your prediction be?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. Many years ago, it was robotics, RPA or RDA, desktop automation, robotic automation. Then it started to move towards connected RPA, intelligent automation, hyper automation. I think the terms are going to change, but I think the fundamentals are the same, with one difference. And I'll get to that one difference in a second. But the fundamentals are, if you just do automation, you're only ever going to automate the first 20% and the last 20% of a business process. Because what is automation, right? We're talking about headless robots. We're talking about the arms and legs. We're talking about moving data from one system to another. And, in large, complex organizations, there is a lot of opportunity to do that and do the whole, as I like to call it, take the robot out of the human. So we can have humans serving humans instead of moving data from one system to another. So there's the great applicability of that to reduce human debt, redirect that energy and capacity to serving customers, and again, take the robot over the human. But the reality is that you're always going to hit a ceiling around, as I said, 20% of the business process. If you want to start to automate more of a business process, grow that penetration, the only way to do that is through connecting robotic automation with other tools. And what I mean by that is, as an example, let's just say we had an OCR engine that scanned a form. Previously, when that form came into an organization as a picture and it hit a mailbox, we could never automate that because the robot can't do anything with a picture. So the moment though you digitize that form and you lift the data out and it goes into a location for a robot to pick it up, it can pick it up and do something with it. Automatically, you've increased your automation opportunities 5 to 10x straight away, both in terms of new opportunities, but also in terms of increasing the automation penetration of a business process. Well, robotics is your arms and legs, OCR is your eyes. Well, what if we stitch it together with a workflow in between so that a human can see where things are at? We're able to get transparency of status of a work item and reduce any duplication. Automatically, again, you're able to step that up again, the amount of automation penetration with OCR as the eyes, robotics as the arms and legs, and then a spine, a supportive spine as your workflow. So what's missing from there is your more intelligent kind of side of things. So I think having the sentiment analysis, voice to text, that kind of becomes like your ears and your mouth. And then you've got your more machine learning models, which is like your brain. So how can we have low-level decisions made that then inform an action of the robot that then goes on to a workflow? You get the idea, right? So I think the fundamental is by connecting these technologies together, you're able to automate much more of a business process and then produce much more benefit to the business in whatever definition benefit is. It could be risk reduction, better customer experience, creating capacity, setting up a scale, that sort of really important stuff that we're seeing nowadays. I think therein lies, and it's that, but that done at scale is where I see things going. I think the past has been a lot of doing robotics and getting robotics to a point of scale and success. And obviously not every company is at that point yet. But then the next part is connecting it with other technologies in a manner such that it's still positioned and seen as cheap, nimble, fast, rapid, but you're delivering multiple technologies, automating more of a horizontal process and delivering that benefit result at scale. That's where I see the future going. And from what I can see, there's a lot of small scale implementations of machine learning in the context of process automation, but I'm not seeing as much of that as in a scaled format. And neither am I seeing, as I said, connecting all of those capabilities together in a scaled format. So I think that's where the future is. What that term is, I have no idea. I'll leave that to the others to figure out that term. And as I said before, there is one, I said it's the fundamentals, and the fundamentals haven't changed except for one thing. And that one thing that I think is very interesting, that I'm very excited about, is process mining, process and task mining. I think that in itself is quite a big game changer in the context of any transformation, any digital transformation, broader than just robotics, broader than automation. I think there's a really big opportunity for organizations to become a lot more data-driven, a lot less anecdote, gut feel, pain point driven, and to really let the data point to where we should be spending our energy and transformation dollars, and then delivering the biggest bang for buck as per what the data is telling us. So yeah, I think it's kind of the fundamentals of what is intelligent automation, hyper automation, but at scale, with the addition of process and task mining, which is really going to accelerate digital transformation in general, but absolutely also accelerate automation as well.
Yeah, recently I've heard some really cool stories around process and task mining and how that's catapulting them forward. So I would be interested in 6 months or so from now, following up with you and hearing about your successes in that area. So you mentioned just a few moments ago that there are various points along the way, and companies are at various stages, not only in automating some of the tasks, but in moving forward into this scaled automation. What are the consequences for businesses if they don't do this? If a listener out there hasn't started automating some of that first and last 20%. What are the consequences to them in their business if they don't get going?
Yeah, I think it's the ultimate consequence is just the value left on the table. So there's an opportunity cost. There's an opportunity to have done more, have better served customers, to have released that pressure valve in really critical areas in operations, for example, is ultimately what it is. So what does that mean? Well, I think, as I said before, there's a spectrum, right? There's manual on the left, on the most left of the spectrum, and a process performed manually. And on the most right is a process performed straight through using your digital or native technologies, APIs, all that sort of good stuff. And it's certainly, especially in the context of organizations that have legacy and that they're always towing the line between supporting and building up the digital experience, but also bringing along the legacy platforms. There's a middle ground. So if you're not doing automation, you're missing out on the middle ground. But the middle ground is not an or, it's an and. Automation is a stepping stone to your digital endpoint. And it's an opportunity to leverage automation, produce outcomes that support customers and business colleagues now, whilst in parallel, you're building those digital experiences and those digital systems and channels. So really, that's the opportunity. It's to play that two-speed game. It's the and, not the or. I find some people think of it in a very black and white context. It's automation or the digital, whereas certainly my mindset is it's both. And there's so many examples and use cases where automation or the digital workforce has done something that people nor digital systems could ever do in that time span. And I think those examples really come true in those crisis moments, in those moments where there's a surge and peak in demand to a business process. And it's just, you can't serve those customers in time. And I think globally, we can see those things occur or have occurred, certainly during COVID, and the way in which organizations communicate and serve customers during COVID. I think other examples would be places like insurance. And it's all around this ability to scale up a digital workforce quickly to serve those peaks in demand. I think that's so over and above the benefits all I've just talked about. There is this amazing benefit here to leverage a digital workforce to actually help customers in a moment that really matters. Because typically the moment that matters for the customer is when your organization is at its busiest, it's at its peak, because you have a lot of customers who are in a moment that matter. So then how do you approach that and how do you deal with that? I think that's where automation can, on top of being that middle ground, that stepping stone, and achieving whatever benefit you needed to, there's this unique opportunity to serve customers in those moments that matter, whether that be hardship, insurance, COVID, seasonal peaks, end of financial year, whatever it is. All businesses go through peaks and surges in demand. I think I've never seen something so far that can really meet that need as well as a digital workforce.
Well said, and way to end it, focusing on customers and how to make sure that customers' needs are met first and foremost, and helping us maintain that competitive advantage that we have in whatever industry we're working in.
Yeah, no, I agree. At the end of the day, it's all for customers. That's why the organizations kind of exist, customers and shareholders. I think in the context of automation, it's always important not to lose sight of both the internal customer as well as the external customer.
Couldn't agree more. Next to customers is right up there, and employees and keeping them happy. As I know in my business, customer experience, it really does start with employees and making sure that they're as happy as they can be, and they will spread that happiness to the customers. Abhi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, Xina.
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining. Be sure to connect with Abhi on LinkedIn. We'll provide his connection information in the show notes. And until next time, have a wonderful day. This is Xina signing off.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how SS&C Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.